Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this episode is very important. This is our 400 episode, and we are collaborating with CASA, uh, and we are discussing on public-private collaboration for climate change for water security. This is our second episode. The first episode in first open dialogue, Dr. Ching from CASA, he joined in the opening remarks. So I want to start the second sessions, and I want to give chance uh, Professor Paul. Before that, I just want to introduce our other speakers. We have Mr. Paul Sladax, founder of non-profit organizations Good News. We have Professor David Smith, uh, CEO Strategic Pathway USA. We have Professor Dr. Fred Philip, President Tando. We have Dr. Nikhil Agarwal. He's a CEO from IIT Kanpur, Dr. Ingrid from USA, Professor Ainul Jaria Maidin, International Islamic University, Malaysia. We have Mr. Iftekhar Pathan. He's a World Business Angel Investment Forum Turkey Senators. He is from India. We have Mr. Donald Owens, Chairman HNO International USA. Beside that, Mr. Tom Rose, he has a plan to join, but he sent already a video. He is in air travel. And also Dr. Talib Rafael, he is Secretary General World Tourism Organization. He has planned to join in these sessions. Thank you. I want to start from Mr. Paul. He's the founder of non-profit organization Good News. Mr. Paul.
Good morning, everybody. What an illustrious group of dignified people involved with water, with the betterment of our society, with working together. And I think I'm going to utilize our Good News name. The good news will be the more we work together, the more we take concern to our environment, to our nature as a planet. So we hold up this card very often. This card is not just a card. This is Mother Earth. This is from the moon. This is the blue marble. So the blue marble seems to have a lot of water, and we all need to realize that we are one Earth and one group, and that as far as we're concerned, water is a right for all to have. And we can talk about public and private, but the fact is that we are all one Earth. So we should figure out better ways for fresh drinking water, clean water, sustainable goal of water. We've been involved. We started Nature, a series here in the PBS, and been involved with the clear water. So we've been doing this for over 20 plus years, involvement with water. So we have a show called The Water Hour, and let's all discuss better ways to work together to get water to those that are at need, of which there are, unfortunately, big numbers of people that don't get water and that will pass from there. So Sharif, thank you very much. This is a great group, and I appreciate being involved, and all the best in health and wellness for all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a questions to you because you are running a media. This media also very much supportive for World Talent Economy Forum because you give us chance to explore our news and other things. My question is that we are working with public-private partnership with CASA, Climate Change Departments in Malaysia. So what is your advice? How media can play a role for this public-private partnership, and how the developed nations and developing nations can work together?
Well, I think media can support projects that are better for society. It's their obligation. There are two obligations. One is to support things happening in the world that are not so good, and then two is to support those things that are happening that are good. And I think the more they support the things that are happening that are good, the better more people will feel. So media has that responsibility. Good news. More good news than the bad news, period.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Always you ask me one question. What peace means to me? So my questions to you, what peace means to you, and how actually our global collaborations can develop more sustainable ecosystem?
Well, thank you, Sharif. Well, that's because September 21st, we are involved in for many years for the Peace Day, International Day of Peace, as declared by the United Nations and all the countries of the United Nations. And we've done events for over 20 years as well. Peace for me is love, and is loving one another, respecting each other, and um, and caring about our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I want to give chance Professor Dr. Professor David Smith, CEO, Strategic Pathway USA. Professor David Smith.
Well, Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of this very distinguished group this morning. As we've talked about where we need to go to solve some of the problems, particularly grand challenges with what we need to do with water, there we've talked a lot about public-private partnerships, and I'm going to share a screen with me in just a minute where we're really looking at what public-private partnerships are and what they can be. And a public-private partnership really is the public and the private coming together to look at items of a long-term nature. Well, water and its practice is really a long-term nature of what we're trying to do. But what we've seen in public-private partnerships is a new model has emerged from where there's self-contained regional clusters to where there's specialized network regions coming together. And you've heard me often say that the new geography is location and geography is no longer a point on the map. It's where you can find the competencies, capabilities, and things to do the job you're wanting to be done. And if you look at regional economic development, it's been industry location, retention, expansion, building new companies. But really today, the new institutional alliances and partnerships are what is making economic development different today. And there's a concept that a gentleman who Dr. Phillips and I both worked with, George Kosmetsky, which was called the Technopolis. And technos, technology, and polis is the Greek word for the city state, which really reflects the balance between it. And I believe the new form of technology, public private partnerships should be based around a technopolis concept that links the technology commercialization, the science, the outputs with the public private sector and academia. And Dr. Kosmetsky came up with a Technopolis wheel, which linked governments, state governments, federal governments, emerging companies, large companies, medium companies in education, and the know-how network together around it to enact this change. And Technopolis concept is really has a couple key assumptions. One of them is there's a rapid increases in technology is changing the nature of competition, and we've all seen that. The technology uh, curve is on a hyper growth hockey stick right now, and because of that, the world's becoming connected. It's all digital, and we live in a time that is really where we're doubling the amount of data in the world every 2 years. The assumption, too, is the nature of economic development has fundamentally and permanently changed. We have new institutional alliances, new relationships that are really setting the key for it. And then the COVID pandemic hit, which actually accelerated the need to go into this technopolis type of competition where academia, the government, and industry are now more tightly connected at the hip than ever. And it really is the global challenge now of how creativity through this technopolis concept drives innovation and where innovation's going. And you really see the three of them coming together with the community and the market need, with the talent, the technology, the capital, and the know-how to do the work that's necessary to be successful today. But what's really interesting to me is the Technopolis concept has dramatically expanded, where instead of just a network in the middle, it's now a network of networks built upon a system of systems. And the entrepreneurship, the education, the technology, is now a globalized view of that technopolis wheel and what we can do to be successful today. That to me is the new nature, this new paradigm we have of the new way to look at public-private partnerships. My first public-private partnerships were some of the industrial consortia and things we formed. I was involved with the MCC and the Cemitec consortia, which helped redefine those. But the new public-private partnerships have to go beyond what we did back then. You've got to have entrepreneurship as part of it. Entrepreneurship is a key driver today. It's the way to accelerate the change that's necessary to meet particularly grand challenges like we see in the climate change area, like we see with the critical resource of water, and actually how these get dispersed internationally, because it is a global problem and not one that the old geography of place can solve. It's one that the new geography of competency and capabilities has to use to solve the problem. So, Sharif, that's my quick thoughts on it. Sharif, you're muted.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Can you hear me right now?
I can.
Yes, there is a question from our partner. He is Mr. Julkifli. He's the president of Green Caucus, Asia Pacific Green Caucus. His question is that non-water revenue leakage burst pipe has become a perennial problem, and what possible ways to effectively solve this solution, monitor or water management? Like, can you share some of the solution for water management?
Well, water management's one that is, again, you have to look at from a total ecosystem perspective and how you can balance the different elements on it. You know, the ability to apply some of the science on being able to not use as much water in manufacturing, to be able to look at other areas to use different types of water for irrigation for the agriculture side, the ability to look at ways where you can take and use gray water, many places where it has not been used before, is one that really is one that I think we're beginning to get more into the path of today. But water is a necessity, and many wars have been fought over water. So the ability to put it together in a plan that works across the region, because in many instances, water is a regional resource and not that of just one country. And you need to view that as the ecosystem of the partnership of them working together to solve the problem.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor David Smith. Now I request Professor Dr. Fred Philip. He is a president of Tando Incorporation, USA. Professor Fred.
Thank you, Sharif. Well, it's our privilege today to speak to the Ministry of Environment and Water in Malaysia. So let me be slightly more formal in my remarks than I usually am on your program, Sharif. I understand we have a guest from the ministry, Secretary Rahim. So good day, and to the other excellencies from the ministry, thank you for inviting me to speak to you on behalf of the global think tank Tando. Among the Tando Fellows, including my colleagues David Smith and Nikhil Agarwal, who are with us today, we have a number of prominent city planners, but all of us at Tando share the ministry's interest in smart, innovative, and sustainable cities for our shared future. With one of the fellows, former Chungnam National University President Dr. Dogsong Oh, I've just edited a book on smart cities. Our third co-editor is Dr. Mohan Avari of Nottingham University, Malaysia, and our publisher is in Singapore. I understand that you at the ministry are considering the roles of public-private partnerships, known as PPPs, in creating the cities of the future. Public-private partnership is a pretty term, but it's misleading. And I completely agree with all the positive aspects of the new mode of PPP that Mr. David Smith just shared with us. But the PPP idea can be misleading because in projects that cross the sectors of society, participants tend to know little about the so-called partners' motives and objectives. This incomplete information colors the government's basic PPP decision, namely where to solicit private help on the design, build, operate, maintain spectrum. So unlike in a classic partnership limited liability corporation, the partner's motives and objectives in a PPP are at odds, or can be at odds and remain at odds throughout the project with long-lasting consequences. So I'll offer some examples. Through the Incheon Free Economic Zone, called IFEZ, the Korean government intended for Songdo, a new district of Incheon metropolitan city, to be a technopolis, a hub of technological innovation. Not understanding the smart city technology sufficiently, IFEZ left the smart infrastructure decisions to a private company. Not understanding the needs of innovative entrepreneurs, the government and the private partner put in place expensive and intrusive surveillance technology that made the district unattractive for entrepreneurs. Not understanding the genesis of Technopolis elsewhere in the world, IFEZ left too many decisions to real estate developers. And I might also add that the financial plan for Songdo was based on an overly rosy forecast of GDP. So in the end, these factors, plus Songdo's odd location between downtown Seoul and the Incheon International Airport, resulted in Songdo becoming a home for international agencies, UN offices, and so forth, rather than innovative new ventures. So the lesson from Songdo is that each partner has to know enough about the other partner's areas of expertise to ensure that the objectives are well defined. I give you a second example from my home city of Albuquerque in the USA. The city can't afford to place human police officers at every intersection where speeding drivers pose a danger. The city looked for a private firm to provide speed cameras at each of these intersections. Then speeders caught by the cameras would be issued a fine via postal mail. At first, the private company was to be responsible for maintaining and calibrating its own cameras and would be paid a fraction of each assessed fine. Citizens complained that this incentivized the company to cheat on the calibration in order to seek more revenue. Plan B was for the company to be paid a flat acquisition fee and for a fraction of each of the fines to go to the police department. Again, city citizens rallied to highlight the dangers of a for-profit police force. In the end, the private firm installed the cameras for a fixed fee. An additional unrelated private firm was contracted to check the camera's calibration, and proceeds from the speeding fines go to the city general treasury with the police department budgeted in the traditional manner. The lesson here is that the parties must be sensitive to public opinion and to the perverse incentives that may be built into the PPP. Now a final example, the innovative and famous Silicon Valley spans several cities south of San Francisco. So which government is responsible for what? In what ways were private companies playing one of the city governments against another for their private advantage? A coordinating information system would have solved many problems. As we established in a project for Korea's KISTI, the Institute of Science and Technology Information. These problems included obstacles to entry for promising entrepreneurs, but also the problems of success, which now include skyrocketing rents, choking traffic, and the destruction of the traditional neighborhoods that were so important for tourism in San Francisco. Despite the rise of many facilitating organizations, like the Silicon Valley Partners, the Valley's primary actors preferred to exchange information not through automated systems, but rather through personal relationships and introductions. We shouldn't underestimate our human tendency to construct barriers to entry. That is, to succeed and then shut the door behind us. So what are the lessons of Silicon Valley? Among them would be, number one, create a vision of what constitutes success. And number two, note how that vision balances private costs against public costs. Now let me for a moment address water and climate change. Tourist destinations worldwide, including in Malaysia, are threatened by climate change. And like the technopoles, tourist cities need information systems to track local companies' progress and local governments' progress toward climate goals, to keep track of regulations, and to share ideas and solutions with similar tourist cities around the world. Mr. Mark Carney, who is the UN Special Envoy on Climate Action, this month told the Washington Post newspaper that such systems do not yet exist. Tondo is prepared to build and maintain such a system for Malaysia. Climate change can't be mitigated with today's technologies. Our survival depends on continuing invention and innovation. Some of the newest technologies must be imported. It's a fact. Tondo is engaged in a project with Taiwan's government to train graduate students in international technology transfer. But indigenous technologies also form parts of the climate answer. And some of them can be helpful when they're shared beyond their original borders, that is, when they're exported. And a great example is the ancient step wells that now help to curb India's water crisis. These step wells were recently featured in a BBC broadcast. So technology transfer is a two-way street, even between the developed countries and the developing countries. So I think my time is up. I thank you again for the opportunity to be here and to offer PPP coordination and climate information systems. So I'm happy to take questions, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Fred Philip. I want to take a question from audience. Why public-private partnership is important in developing sustainable innovation?
Oh, well, I would say that private companies may often have expertise that a concerned government agency does not have. It can there's a myth, I would say, that governments can't make technology choices as efficiently as private companies. I think this is not true. People in government are as smart, every bit as smart as people in private corporations, and vice versa. It's just that private corporations, when a mistake is made, they can often fix it faster than the government can. Governments tend to set up new bureaucracies to address every problem, and if they address it incorrectly, it takes a very long time to dismantle that bureaucracy. This is not the case in the private sector. So government can gain more agility through public-private partnerships.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, for your excellent speech. Now I request Dr. Nikhil Agarwal, IIT Kanpur, India.
Many thanks, Mr. Sharif, and many thanks to my friend Iftikhar Pathan and Dr. Ingrid, who I see from WBF, and all other speakers who have joined us from across the world. Uh, just quickly explain you my role here. That will help you in understanding my position, what I am willing to say. I manage India's largest incubator, which is also fondly called the Y Combinator of India. So we have close to 150 incubated startups in various domains, and of course, the water and climate change is one of the core domains that we look at. But we look at being a tech institution. So IIT Kanpur is founded around 60 years back with the help of MIT and Stanford. We were the first institution to have a computer science department. So we are trying to solve the problems in various technology using computer science methodology or information technology. So we have a number of startups that we have today in trying to solve the problem of climate change for water security. As you know, India is the largest population in the world after China, close to home to 1.3 billion people. The water scarcity is becoming a great challenge. The close to 50% of the Indian population does not have access to clean water. Similar situation exists in other parts of the world, and it could be even worse. For the when we were growing up, we have always seen that the water, what we used to drink from tap, that does not exist. We have to buy bottles, and we have to buy. So how do you solve the problem of water scarcity? At the same time, the climatic change that we are facing, whether it's across the country or across the world, that has become daunting. The summers are becoming more intense, winter are becoming more intense. The monsoon does not stop. The disaster recovery systems, what we have planned, does not work. How do you solve those problems? The soil, which is continuously changing its character, the crops that we used to grow in one season is not able to grow at that time because the climate has changed, the soil character has changed. How do you determine the character and the change of the soil? The GIS, the mapping, the floodplains, the we are blessed with number of rivers, and of course the ocean is there from the three sides of India. So how the floodplains are changing? These are some of the challenges we face on a daily basis. One of the great challenges that we also face, which is directly related to climate change, is availability of toilets. Almost 20% of the Indian population does not have access to clean toilets. How do you provide access to clean sanitization, which require water and which require a different approach? How do you solve these problems? Now, some of these problems we are cognizant, and we are trying to solve these problems through the way of startups. Uh, what we have seen over the period of time, that the startups are looking at different kind of challenges. For example, in water and sanitation, which are doing certain manufacturing. I can give you certain instances that the problem that has been solved by our startup companies. There is a company called Krishnam Technologies, which is building cost-effective infrastructure for low power, low range, RF-based wireless communication system, which is used for monitoring the water changes in the dam or in the river. So the small IoT devices are placed on the water surfaces, and so that it can determine that the changes are happening. There's another company called Jal Sevak. Jal Sevak is Jal means water, is providing affordable and scalable on-site grey water recycling solution at residential and commercial facility. There is another company which is building up a plastic kind of film using the STP water, which is disposed by the industry. Millions of liters of water which has been disposed as STP water from the industry. What do you do with that? In a traditional setting, you normally release that into the river stream, but at the same time, can you treat that? That one of the startup is doing. There's another very interesting company we have called Gurv Toilet, which is building IoT-enabled portable vandal-proof toilet cabin with auto flush, floor clean technology, biodigestible tank, and grey water recycling. You just have to install the toilet, and it is done. Everything works on a technology basis. A number of municipalities across the country are now using these toilets. Another company, for example, Thorough Engineering, using water filtration solution to numeric solution of fluid mechanics and structural mechanics. So companies are solving those problems. Now, these problems are not India's problem only; they are the world problem. The same can be applicable in Malaysia, same can be applicable in Africa, same can be applicable in US. How do you replicate when the problems are being replicated? How do you replicate the solution? That's another question that is quite important. Now, coming to these kind of forums like Dubai Expo 2020, that provides an opportunity for scaling up some of these solutions which can be adopted by countries across the world. The climate change is not affecting only India. This climate change is not affecting only Asia. The climate change is not affecting only a part of the world. It is is affecting the entire population. We have to find the solutions together. If there is a tsunami happening in Indonesia, the US should be worried. If there is a cyclone coming in US, India should be worried. It is a common air that we breathe. It is a common water that we drink. It is a common land that we share. That's how we can solve this problem by using technology. That is a motto that we are looking at from the Indian perspective. And I'll stop here for this round, and maybe if some other questions will come, we'll take up in the
Yes.
next round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. There is one question I want to take from our audience. Is it climate change, global warming, and global climate crisis solvable as your innovation lab solve many problems? So do you think that with the initiative of this kind of solution lab, we can solve climate crisis?
So it's about, like, Sharif, I'll take it as a, I'll give you another example. We have just seen Olympics happening. So when the Olympics happen, there is the sports person are intense pain. They are competing for the gold medal. And then there are painkillers which can reduce the pain. The pain does not go away immediately. Same way that the solutions that we are building is able to solve one problem or two problems, because the climate problem is not able to solve by one company or two companies. It's a collective problem and it's not going to go away. Let me give you a good news and the bad news. The good news is that we are trying hard to solve the problems, but at the same time the problem is becoming so intense it may not be solved immediately. So we have to try hard, and we have to. It's more than the problem trying to solve by the technology. It's the problem of civil understanding, our own habits that we have to change. We have to stop using plastic. We all know about it, but how many of us has actually used the plastic in the last 30 days time? And I will say, yes, I have done it. I am a culprit to it, and I'm sure everybody else is culprit to it. How many times we spoke about the carbon emission? How many times we have taken a plane to go from one place to another where we would have done the Zoom? I have done it. Everybody else has done it. So it's more about the habit that we have to change than the climate problem that can be solved by a couple of companies. That's how I will take it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nikhil. Now I request Dr. Ingrid for her speech.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor to participate. I wear multiple hats, and today I speak to you as the founder and CEO of the Institute for Science, Entrepreneurship, and Investments. I also have the opportunity, like you heard, to work with several colleagues internationally through the World Business Angel Investment Forum. And I also collaborate with many colleagues internationally in several United Nations affiliated groups. And I have the privilege to be part of the European Union Blockchain Observatory, where we work on multiple initiatives that can be helpful in our quest for supporting SDGs globally. I would like to structure my remarks in a way that mirrors the institute that I'm leading, which is science, entrepreneurship, and investments. As other speakers have already highlighted, technology-driven innovation is crucial in our efforts, and many important aspects were already mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat those, but I do believe in our efforts in building and designing smart cities. We have to be more conscious about all the opportunities we have to not only build smart cities in each of our cities and like was mentioned before, be more mindful about the global ecosystem. So create smart communities and smart ecosystems, and like our speakers before mentioned the Technopolis, I think that's extremely important. So one of the aspects that I've always encouraged when I work with our teams on smart cities is to emphasize cross-border portability and interoperability in all our efforts. And nothing is more important when we talk about water. You cannot ignore that we have to all work together, and just developing beautiful, amazing state-of-the-art systems in one city is not going to solve it globally. So I would like to speak to you a little bit about the opportunity we have in creating global data exchanges that are focused on water security. And that would mean sharing relevant data so that we can have actionable insights. That would also mean developing data standards that are geared towards water security, and also developing KPIs that help us track all these initiatives long term. Because sadly, one of the elements that I see is that we develop beautiful programs, we have the most amazing strategic roadmaps and implementation playbooks, but then we forget to track all these efforts in the long term. So it's very difficult if we do not have real-time actionable insights to develop relevant metrics. So that's the first observation. The second one, I would just like to echo the comments before in terms of the science-driven innovation. I do believe that some of the emerging technologies that I'm very involved in, not only AI, blockchain, but also next-generation computing, can really move the needle and change the paradigm. We already have, of course, edge and cloud computing, but I think quantum computing can bring new opportunities when we try to tackle such large-scale projects such as water security. So there are some efforts already underway. In the second domain that I wanted to address, which is related to investments, I think we also see several global trends. Over the past few years, we've seen increased advocacy for impact investing, but I think it's time, and the pandemic has accentuated this need to now move towards actionable insights. So I do notice that we have increased impact investing in several markets, but then there are other markets where there is absolutely no funding and funding went down. So a more balanced approach towards impact investing that can help water security would be important. And I'm sure some of our audience members will ask, well, how do we achieve that? As you know, experts disagree. Should you have only incentives? Should you have mandates that require companies to work towards this, just like we've had with other SDGs? And I'm a believer in a balanced scorecard. So I do believe that the right mix between incentives, and they can be tax incentives or any other kind of incentives, and some mandates would probably be the best approach for a long-term sustainable model. It is also my observation that just having these specific targeted approaches is not enough either. So when you look at the blue economy strategic roadmaps, all of them are trying to emphasize that we must have an ecosystem approach, like Professor Smith mentioned at the beginning, and then Professor Phillips as well. So we do have a duty, I think, to think holistically and at a global macroeconomic scale as well when we develop these programs. And again, I think in order for that to work, we need good global data systems and actionable analytics. So there's no way around it. That one also, that approach, the blue economy approach, will also require, I think, innovative business models. We always think about innovation as just technology and entrepreneurship, but I do believe that we must come up with novel financial instruments and novel business models that are also more amenable to these kind of global tasks. Right now, everything we see is usually centered and focused and customized for our cities or our regions or continent. I think having a broader perspective and engagement models that can truly leverage those public-private partnerships that my other colleagues have mentioned would be very important. And then last but not least, I would like to also echo what other speakers have mentioned about the importance of education. If we don't educate future generations on the importance of SDGs in general, and water is a very important element, then we're not going to be able to sustain all these efforts. So starting early on to change the culture in education, early education even, I would say primary school, even kindergarten, because that's when you shape future generations' approach towards the environment, I think is essential. And then, of course, all the way to executive education, where we must embed some of these efforts into a postgraduate and executive education programs. Otherwise, we create future leaders that never even heard about SDGs. It happens all the time that I participate in certain forums where people don't even know what SDG or ESG consciousness is. So to wrap it all up, tech-driven innovation, actionable insights, global data exchanges, leveraging emerging technologies to our benefit, novel business models, new financial instruments, balanced scorecard would be my approach. As some of you know, I am a very big believer in digital ethics, and I do believe there's an opportunity also when we design proactive ethics programs to embed some of this ESG consciousness in those as well. And design thinking. I don't want us to forget that whatever we create and build, we must have a human-centric approach so that the citizens that live in these technopolies can actually benefit every single day from their quality and have a direct impact in their quality of life on a daily basis. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts, and I really appreciated all the wonderful comments that were made by my colleagues before. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Ingrid. Thank you for your excellent analysis. I have one question from our audience, especially this question we get from previous session. Doctor, what are the challenges facing this public and private partnership, and how we can solve these things?
Sure. Well, I in my experience, when I've had an opportunity to be part of some of these efforts, I think we still have a lot of legal and regulatory barriers in addition to all the others that my colleagues have mentioned. We must find a better way to create a global data governance that can help these public-private partnerships, because otherwise I see still silos, and having more cross-border collaboration when we establish these public-private partnerships is important. And I regret to mention it again, but I think those innovative financial instruments need to also be geared towards supporting these public-private partnerships. Otherwise, the public-private partnerships can't be sustained long-term either. So I think those are some of the challenges. I also think that public trust is important. We must restore public trust, and the public-private partnerships are important, but sometimes there is a perception by the public that all is very difficult to track. So being more transparent and having more accountability in these public-private partnerships would be important as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Now I request our honorable speaker, Professor Dr. Ainul Zaria Maidin. She is from International Islamic University and she is from Malaysia.
Hello, everyone. Good evening from Malaysia. Thank you for joining our program, our ministry's program. It's very interesting, to listen to all the technological and scientific contribution coming from the legal and policy background. My research basically looks at environmental issues as a complex, wicked problem. So when we look at the public-private partnership, especially coming from developing nation, and I myself being involved with the ministry, I work closely with the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Land, and also planning. So all these problems are actually very interconnected, and it's rather complex and wicked. You know, when I say wicked, it's not the wicked stepmother, but more in terms of it's too complex that it's not easy to solve. So when we look at the public-private partnership, this is from my personal experience in Malaysia. There are quite a number of challenges I think that we need to address. Let me list down some of the challenges that I identified from our own experience. So the first one is institutional fragmentation, where the institutions are divided into sectoral ministries, and even within the ministry there are different departments. So this is one of the core issue that I think we really need to look at. Second, unclear and sectoral legislation. In Malaysia, we have about nearly 50 legislations talking about water, environmental pollution. So it's all sectoral, and at the same time, it's not very clear. Like it's like no man's land. Yeah? Power is given, but you know who is to solve what, and then the gray areas, and everyone is very protective of their power. We are also looking at the poor implementation of law because they are multi-layered governance. So law is there, but implementation and enforcement is a big issue. And then we have a limited capacity at the local level. So in Malaysia, we have a three-tier government, the federal government, which really don't have much executive power, more coordinative, consultative, and advisory, and also to create uniform law, because water resources, especially raw water, is under the state power. Then we have the state government, which I mean has more power in terms of exploiting the natural resources and water. And then we have the local government. However, the local government, despite being the implementer and enforcing agency, their hands are tied because most of the executive power is with the state authority, where we have the elected elected state legislative assembly members, and some other political intervention. Yeah? That comes into play. Yeah? And we have also fragmentation of financial management. There's lots of what do I say? I'm not a financial person, but at the same time, we can see that there is spillages in terms of the financial management, not optimizing the available resources. We also have issues with poor allocation of resources, manpower, technology, as well as trained experts to help. We have inadequate water resources. Malaysia relies very much on rainwater. We are not harvesting the underground water. We have quite a bit of we have quite a lot of underground water resources, but we are relying more on rainwater. And at times, managing rainwater reservoir is also a big issue. Pollution, and at times we relax the foreign investment. To attract foreign investment, we relax some of our rigid legal aspects, as well as licensing. I always tell my students, license to pollute. Yeah? We allow certain amount of pollution, and we also have issues relating to increase in demand of water use. So in Malaysia, especially in big cities, even 2 weeks ago we had water cut because they need to do some maintenance, but it affected thousands, millions of users, because Kuala Lumpur is a big city, very high density, and there are many people living there, including our foreign workers. So the government, especially developing countries, I believe that when we go for public-private partnership, there must be clear demarcation of the role of the government and the private partner who's coming in, and there must be also role for the, as Ingrid said just now, awareness and also participation. We need to promote more public awareness and participation to avoid. The research shows that public is the bigger polluter than the industry, because we have more individuals contributing to pollution. Industries we can control. It's not easy to control individuals, so we really need to control the individuals. So when we look at the public-private partnership, my hypothesis is that there is lack of effective coordination, and also there is no comprehensive manner in managing. So the government need to have some sort of a control, because water is is for public interest. So we cannot simply allow the private sector to dominate. So again, I reiterate that in solving wicked water problems, we need to look at all the relevant issues, not only at one sector, the water resource sector, or water management sector, but the governance should look at various aspects beyond that. So that includes public awareness, public participation, and also to make sure that the uh, private partner who comes in is not dominated. I mean, you know what can you get me? It's like there's no political intervention appointing this private partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ainul. Thank you for joining today's session. I have a specific question. Can you share some of your view regarding the projects in public-private partnership in Malaysia, and what are the benefit actually the foreign company can get through this policy?
Actually, Malaysia is a very good. I mean, we offer very good climate for investment. Even World Bank study shows that Malaysians are ready for this, and their indicators also very good. Yeah, we facilitate. We have the economic planning unit where they facilitate private. Investors coming in, also local. Actually, we have a big number of investors. Again, when I don't know if I have time, but I can share some case law where when we bring in investors, we tend to relax laws. Yeah, I mean, if I want to talk about stories about case law, what's decided by court is quite lengthy. I don't want to take much time, but there are situations where the licensing conditions have been relaxed, and also when there's pollution, some sort of tolerance is there, which I think shouldn't be happening lah, because we must also respect the resources. Resources are getting scarce, and water is a very important source for all sorts of life activities that we need, to carry on our livelihood. So that most welcome to come and participate in Malaysian economy. Everyone is most welcome.
Thank you, Professor Ainul Jaria Maidin. Now I request Mr. Iftekhar Pathan. He is a senator for World Business Angel Investment Forum, Turkey. He's from India. Mr. Iftekhar Pathan.
Thank you, Sharif, for giving us the opportunity to talk on this very important topic. I think I should congratulate you and the ministry and the other partners on selecting this very important issue, which all of us need to come together and address. And good evening and salams to all the guests and the panelists. Also, the excellencies who've joined from the ministry. My regards and salams to them too. So, obviously, a lot has been said, and that leaves me with, sharing the India perspective with you guys. And with your permission, Sharif, I'd just like to share my screen.
Sure.
Are you able to see this?
No.
No.
Okay. Just give me a minute.
I think Mr. Pathan, I think you continue. No problem. Yes.
I can't see my screen somehow.
Share. There is a share option. If it takes time, no problem. You just continue your speech.
Okay.
Mr. Iftikhar, I think you can
Yeah,
continue
I
your
think
speech. Yes,
no problems. Yeah. So I
no
think
problem.
India,
Yes.
as you are aware, that all of us share the same problems around the globe. And I was just talking to Vandana Shiva. She's an activist, and I quote her here. Although two-thirds of our planet is water, we face an acute water shortage. The water crisis is the most pervasive, most severe, and most invisible dimension of the ecological devastation of the earth. So I think all of us definitely agree on that. And there are a couple of, there's a new model that is now actually coming up in India. So as far as the collaborations and public-private partnerships are concerned, not too much is happening. So what basically I have done is that we have. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There's some echo. I think.
Mr. Pathan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So I'll just give on. So,
You do
anyways,
not
I
have to
think there
share
is.
anything. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
No worries. So the other thing
Please.
is that I was just looking up some of the statistics, and about 400 million urban dwellers worldwide are affected by water scarcity. 250 million people are without improved sanitation services, causing an estimated 3.4 million deaths, which is quite serious. This is annually through waterborne diseases. These figures will inevitably increase. I think as 80% increase in the water demand is projected by 2015. So, according to the American Meteorological Society, accessibility to a sufficient supply of clean water is one of the critical issues facing society in the 21st century. As you know, we've just come back out of a very severe pandemic, and some of us are still midst of that. So, worldwide, 3 out of 10 people lack access to hand washing with water and soap at home, and that is quite serious. I cherry picked that because I wanted to get to for the importance of hygiene as far as the COVID is concerned. And if you look at India's specific, figures and what is happening, then India is home to about 18% of the worldwide human population and 15% of the worldwide animal population. However, it has just 2% of the landmass and 4% of the worldwide freshwater assets. 1 in 4 healthcare facilities lacks basic water services. 3 in 10 people lack access to safely managed drinking water. 6 in 10 people lack access to safely managed sanitation facilities. 892 million people continue to practice open defecation. And you know, in the rural areas, women and girls are responsible for water collection in 80% of households without access to water on the premises. That's what the situation is in India. As far as the sustainable water partnership is concerned, they have very clearly enunciated a few important aspects in water security needs and key water risks and also the key outcomes. So what they say as key water risks is population growth, climate change, natural disaster, urbanizations, and land use change. as you know that recently the Ministry of Jal Shakti was formed under the aegis of leadership of Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India. They formed a new ministry which combined earlier two ministry into one ministry. And the whole idea and the vision of the new ministry is that to aim to give clean, water to people. They would also encompass any international national disputes, interstate water bodies and rivers which are shared by India along with other neighboring countries. So this ministry started something called the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, that is catch the rain. That is a Jan Andolan. It's like a mass movement of people. And they also have are working towards Nal Se Jal, so that piped water by 2024 to every household. These are the projects that the government is doing. They've also tied up with USAID, and they're working on water sanitation and hygiene, the WASH project that all of us know about. Today, I'm just talking about a few case studies. There is, maybe everyone has heard about the Pani Foundation or the actor who actually started this. His name is Mr. Amir Khan. He is basically someone who is really a public figure, has a name and a clean image. And they started this, the Pani Foundation by him and his wife, and also the core team of Rina Datta and Satya. So these guys this project was actually described as world's best permaculture project by Andrew Millison, Oregon State University. In fact, Andrew came to India, he made a film on it and has posted on his YouTube. So this is one of the most exemplary movement, that is a people's movement that one can see. And Shramadan, like we call in Hindi, which means voluntary labor. So this was the water cup challenge when all the villages were, told to come together, and in which a huge impact was created. So watershed building, groundwater restoring is what the foundation did. So 1,500 villages have become water sufficient, both in farming and drinking water. Now they are moving on to land farming and economy as a next step. So the other project that is very close to my heart, which is in the state that I live in Maharashtra, is the Meghdut project. Now, this project was actually run by the political family who is basically from a place called Baramati, and they are working on this with about 28 villages. So that is one project which has actually been extremely successful. It's called Meghdut project. And in that project, about 7,824 hours were put in. 43,000 capacity building was done, 43,000 square meter. And the impact that is created was 70 crore liters. So these are some of the important projects that happen in India. The other thing that I have personally been involved is we have created a social purpose organization that is called Metasocial. So we are getting all the stakeholders together, in which we can help the NGOs and the non-governmental organizations build up projects for water security and then raise funding for them from the corporate side. So these are the things that from my side, as far as India is concerned and my personal projects are concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Iftekhar Pathan. There is a question for you from our audience. Yes. Onika Shams, her question is, what kind of consultation should I use to construct and procure a PPP project?
So what happens basically is that for a PPP project, one needs to actually work closely with the local government, because to set up a project, the important costs are the infrastructure cost. At least about 65 to 70% is the right infrastructure. So a couple of things there is what I feel is that to define the project properly, and the engagement framework with the government is something that has to be defined well. each projects, there are different types of projects. So you have public-private partnership project, we have build, operate, own, or build, operate, transfer. So you have to decide which one you are going to work on, and accordingly plan your next steps. So it depends on different governments about what is the autonomy they have been given in the state, on the state level. But there is a lot of help and a lot of openness, at least in India, for the public-private partnership projects.
Thank you, Mr. Iftikhar. Now I want to give floor Mr. Donald Owens. He is a chairman of HNO International USA. Can you unmute, please?
I'm sorry. Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Donald Owens. I'm the CEO and founder of H&O Green Fuels and chairman of a company called H&O International. We actually have discovered some technology accidentally that can help to slow down climate change. And I want to share some of my screen so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. But let's see, sharing, share screen. Let's see. It's this, oh my goodness. Can you all see my screen?
No.
Oh my God. So it doesn't work, huh? Let's see, entire screen. I see now, Mr. Patton, what problems you were having, because I was hoping to be able to share my screen. Let me see here. Let me try it one more time. Share screen using too much. Share screen works best as computer. Don't share.
So if it takes time, you can continue.
Yeah, it does not work. Well, okay, but anyway, it's so, boy, I tell you, I understand now, Mr. Patton, why you wanted to share. The most important thing I can possibly tell you guys right now is that black carbon is the enemy of the planet. I have some screens and images to show you about black carbon, and before I leave, hopefully everyone will have this in their mind and why it's so important. But black carbon is the enemy of the planet. It is the direct cause of climate change. It's not one of the causes. It is the cause. It's over 1,500 times worse than CO2. It directly causes our glaciers to melt. It coats, and what black carbon is unburned fuel. Every last one of the fossil fuel that we use creates unburned fuel, and that unburned fuel creates black carbon. What happened a few years ago is we accidentally discovered a way to cut black carbon in half. But what we need to understand first and foremost is that black carbon coats the glaciers, causes them to absorb light instead of reflecting light, and they melt. Most people have never heard black carbon. Most scientists all know about black carbon, but we don't know that there's something we can do about it. But just so we will all know and have no doubts in our mind, it is a direct cause of all of our climate change issues. It causes the weather patterns to change. It causes the ocean currents to change. It causes all kinds of problems, and it's all because of black carbon. So, and it affects everyone. It's the enemy of the planet. And I'm going to say this over and over again because I want everybody to know and understand it, because once we do know and understand why we have such big problems with climate change, we can start doing something about it. And until we identify that as the enemy, we will always be in a situation where it's going to be difficult to affect climate change. But the main cause of climate change, and this is not a bad word, and I don't want anybody to think fossil fuels are bad is a bad word, but it's a fossil fuel energy infrastructure that we live in. We live, breathe, and exist in a fossil fuel energy infrastructure. It's nothing bad about it. It's the way we live. We travel because of it. We have innovations because of it. we have medical advances, we have internet, we have electricity, we have energy because of this fossil fuel infrastructure. But it is this fossil fuel infrastructure that creates all of our black carbon. And until we actually address black carbon, we are not going to ever have any effect on climate change. But we have to understand though that everything that we do is part of that infrastructure. From the restaurants that we go to the travel that we do, to the manufacturing, to the hospitals, to the hotels, everything that we do is because of this fossil fuel energy infrastructure that we live in. And we live in it like fish in an ocean. It creates an ocean of energy that we are all addicted to. Not addicted in a bad way, but it's what we use because we are human beings. So we need this infrastructure and it's vital. And every last one of us are a part of it. From the biggest environmentalists to the biggest climate denier, we are all a part of the infrastructure. And we have to do something about the black carbon that is created because of the infrastructure so that we can resolve it. Now, our technology, and our technology isn't the only technology that exists, but it happens to be one of the technologies that exists now. We use hydrogen to burn fuel better. And that's what we have to do right now. We don't have 30 years to try to improve and 30 years to try to go into a green infrastructure. We actually need the fossil fuel infrastructure that we have, the fossil fuel energy infrastructure, even to build a green infrastructure. So we're not going to get away from fossil fuel. That's what we all need to understand. And until we understand that, we're going to have a very, very tough time battling climate change, because until we can stop our glaciers from melting and our ocean currents from changing, and all that happens because of the black carbon that coats our glaciers. It causes them to absorb light and heat instead of reflecting light and heat, and they melt, and they melt at alarming rates. And most scientists that know about black carbon, they all understand it, but most regular people have never even heard the term. I hadn't heard of black carbon until I accidentally found out in the lab on this technology that I was developing that we cut it in half. And even then it was particulate matter, because in diesel engines, they create quite a bit of particulate matter. And so it turns out that our technology of using hydrogen to burn the fuel better cut the particulate matter in half. And it just so happens that years later, I found out that black carbon was the sooty component of particulate matter, and that black carbon directly, not indirectly, not as a side thing, it directly coats our glaciers and causes them to melt. And as long as we have melting glaciers, we are never going to solve anything with our climate change. You can create as many electric cars, you can create electric buses, you can create windmills, but all of it has to be done with the fossil fuel energy infrastructure. So we can't do anything without it, but we have to burn our fuel better. And that's our challenge. It's a challenge for the entire world to get together to understand what the problem is, and the problem is black carbon. It is literally the enemy of the planet, and we have to treat it that way. We have to treat it that way, just like we've seen movies where the alien species came in and attacked the Earth, and all of us collectively as human beings got together to fight the enemy. And we win in the movies, and we have to win in real life, because this is no joke. I mean, if we don't stop our glaciers from melting, we will have, among other things, we have 800 million people live off glaciers every year in terms of their fresh water. And if we don't have glaciers, we don't have fresh water from those glaciers. So we have to fight black carbon. It's not an option. But it's also not an option for it's not a small feat. It's a big deal, but it's not an option that we all collectively understand first and foremost that it is indeed the enemy. Black carbon must be understood as the enemy. And once we do understand that, what happens with human beings, because we are some of the most creative and innovative, we're just so creative and innovative, we will come up with solutions to reduce black carbon because we have to. So if we want to do anything about climate change and solving our dilemmas, then that's what we have to do. And now, if anybody wants to get more information, they can go to my website. It's called H&O International, and we also have I have a site called DonClimateOwens.com, which talks about the book that I've just written. And the book that I've written has to do exactly what I'm talking about black carbon and how we can actually have hope for climate change. Because right now we don't have much hope. We all know that it happens, but we don't know what we can do about it. But now we can do something about it.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Professor David Smith, Professor Ainul Jaria, Professor Fred Philip, Mr. Dan, Mr. Iftekhar Pathan, Professor Dr. Nikhil Agarwal, Professor Dr. Ingrid, and Mr. Paul for joining today's session. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, we just want to celebrate because this is our 400 episode, and with this episode, actually, we are actually managing many issues. We are developing the open dialogue for modern science, engineering, and technology, when we try to minimize the gap in between developing nations and developed nations. Already more than 400 peoples around the world, corporations, from academia, from policy making institutions, even for the politics, they join in World Talent Economy Forum. And we believe as an organizations, politician, corporation, and academy, if they work together, then we can solve problem properly. And beside that, I want to give special thanks to CASA to give us this opportunity. Dr. Ching Tho, he actually joined in our first session, and beside that, Malaysia actually trying to develop this resilient Malaysia concept, and they are ready for global opportunity. The pillar of resilient development is well-being of environment, social, and economy. The concept of resilient Malaysia ready for global opportunities would bring our initiative that are backed by technology and innovation for climate, green technology, and low carbon and applied solution that would transfer cities and infrastructures. So I believe that Malaysian government, they are working very hard, especially in this Dubai Expo. A lot of large corporations, government bodies, academia, they're joining. Even in from World Talent Economy Forum, we invite more than 20 corporations, academic persons, as well as policymakers, politicians to our World Talent Economy Forum discussions. Beside that, Asia Pacific Green Caucus is our partner for that. And I want to give special thanks to this CASA, because CASA actually playing a very good role. And I request all of our speakers, because this COVID-19 situation, what we learned that we need to play globally, we need to work globally, and we have to minimize the gaps. If any problem come to this global arena, nobody is safe. So we have to be very much careful, and definitely we need to work hard. Public-private partnership is one of the initiative how we can solve many problems. I know we have our excellent speakers from corporation, from academy, and from policymaking institutions. We need to work together, we need to collaborate together, and we are open for collaborations. And definitely, if you are interested to get into this public-private partnership, I'm sure CASA gonna help us, and CASA gonna support that all of the international organization. I believe that Professor Ainul Jaria, she is also a policymaker for Malaysia, and Malaysia has excellent policy, and I'm sure that they have excellent environment for impact investment. So I request all of our speakers, if you have better strategy, better plan, you can share with us. I'm sure Malaysian government, Malaysian local economy definitely gonna support us. And one thing I just want to ensure that Malaysia is a Malaysian are very peaceful nations, and Dr. Ching said Malaysia has a good food. So definitely they have a very peaceful nations, good cultures. So we will arrange conference in offline, maybe in the April, and with your collaborations, definitely we will change this world. So thank you, Professor David Smith, Professor Ainul Jaria, Professor Fred Philip, Mr. Dons, Mr. Iftekhar Pathan, Professor Dr. Nikhil Agarwal, Mr. Paul, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And definitely we will initiate this public-private partnership and we will solve problem together. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank
And
you,
I especially
Sharif.
want to give
Thanks, and
thanks
thanks
to
Thank
for
you,
our
joining.
audience,
Sharif. Thank you,
those who
everyone.
support.
Ciao, Sharif.
Bye-bye.
It's a good learning experience.
Fantastic.